Good evening, everyone. My name is Helen Millisa, and welcome to tonight's evening to celebrate the wonders of Renew. I'm President of the Association and delighted to have such an outstanding group of people here tonight. It's very fitting that we are standing near the sculpture of Bunjil, the wonderful eagle which sailed over this land, and that we're on the banks of the ancient Yarra, because it's appropriate that we pay our respects and acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And so I hope you join me in paying our respects to elders both past and present who are here tonight, and those that aren't. So, dear friends, whether you are a board member or a staff person, a member of the organisation, a donor, a corporate sponsor, a follower, someone who twitters about us, someone who does Facebook about us, someone who attends our events. I'm sure that's probably everyone in the room. Is there anyone I haven't mentioned?
Subscribers.
Subscriber, right? So someone who reads our magazines. Indeed.
Subscribes.
Beg your pardon?
You can read them or you can subscribe and read.
Yes. Indeed. Well, that actually goes to the heart of how we have an incredible membership and such a great support base. This organisation, frankly, if we were to, I think, put all our members and supporters and subscribers into one large city, and then that city happened to disappear off the face of the earth, the sustainability fraction and knowledge in Australia would absolutely plummet. There's no doubt that we and our members are the brains trust in this country, and we are passionate about what this country can achieve. So tonight, the purpose of tonight really is to engage with you, to share with you some of our outstanding achievements over the last 12 months and to talk about some critical directions going forward in the future. So we'll recount our vision, and we're also going to have, as a special feature tonight, some outstanding panellists who will be debating and sharing and providing you with some opportunity for questions and answers. So we're going to be talking pretty much about how to make Australia more sustainable, specifically through our homes tonight. We know that there is so much more that can be said around our vehicles, our transport, and so forth, but really our focus tonight is around our homes and communities. So we'll also have time for you to spend a bit more time enjoying a drink and some more food. Because we're so into sustainability, you are not allowed to leave until all the food and drink is drunk and eaten. We want no food waste. But having said that, I'm sure that there will be someone who will willingly take it home to either feed the chooks or give it to the compost. So we're okay, we're in good territory here. Or eat it tomorrow. Exactly. So, look, the fact is that we are in a dramatic time, aren't we? I think we all recognise the reality. The way in which the world is going isn't a particularly positive one, but we do know that there are signs and glimmers of hope. We know that we have extreme weather coming. We have more extreme weather coming than what we're already experiencing. And we're at this cusp of change. Now, how much of it will happen in government? But we know that it's absolutely fundamental. Without grassroots movement, you won't have government acting. And that's why organisations like Renew are so important. So in comparison to other countries, we have higher energy bills, we have less efficient homes, and we have high transport emissions. In fact, we have the highest tailpipe emissions of any country in the OECD. We're not in a good position, and there's plenty of room for change. So tonight is a time for us to come together, support our members and work together on this sustainable living journey. To all of us come together and support the organisation because it is so urgent. So we have in the Renew a unique organisation in Australia. As you know, it is the sole national organisation with a member base that has a charitable tax deductible status. We recognise that on the board and amongst the staff that is a very privileged and a very special position. We are now 40 years old, or next year we'll be 40 years old, and we've led the way with experts, events and advocacy. So, which one? That one? Yep. Oh, that's me. There you go. I'm not going to be said really, that's about it. So Renew supports over 250,000 people each year, we estimate, to live more sustainably in their homes and in their communities. We've made a very short statement about our strategy for our directions going forward. And it's really ostensibly around three things. Inspiring change, so events like Sustainable House Day, activities like that, and Renew are very much around inspiring and giving people the tools to make the difference. Secondly, it's around enabling change. So by providing the kinds of detailed advice that you can receive via the magazines, through all the various publications and information that we have, we're also enabling the change. Through our members, through our groups, all of that does that as well. And finally, we have decided that we are also in the space of advocacy. So as an organisation which has so much knowledge at its disposal, we recognise in that special privileged, unique position it's absolutely essential that we speak up about the importance of sustainable homes and sustainable living in this country. If we don't do it, who will? And it's really the voice of community and organisations like us working together that we're going to achieve that end. So, without further ado, can I introduce Hilary? Actually, before I do that, could I get my fellow members of the board to please stand up? And past members of the board too. Simon, where are you? So, these hard-working people deserve a round of applause because they are all sincere volunteers. Thank you so much. Can I get the Renew staff to stand up, please? Oh, and there's quite a few down the back. Any past Renew staff that are in the audience? Oh, they haven't come back, I'm sure. How about members? If I got members to stand up, what happens then? Fantastic, all right. Donors, please stand up. Oh, good. Great. Fantastic. Corporate sponsors, please stand up. Yes. Welcome, Damien. That's fantastic. From Bank Australia. We've had some others, but we've had a few unfortunate incidences there. What else are there? Subscribers. Subscribers that are not members yet. We'll work on you tonight. All right, well look, enough of that. And to anyone else who's an avid reader and your supporter, thank you so much. So, Hilary Harper. Who doesn't know Hilary Harper? I don't know. I've got a bio here and I think we could all actually construct one for her without any difficulty whatsoever. So Hilary Harper has been our voice on radio for a very long time for ABC Melbourne. And now she's gone national, which is a true recognition of her skill and capacity. So she presented Morning Breakfast and for 10 years, and now she's host of Life Matters on ABCRN, which is why her dulcet tones are so familiar to us. So without anything further to say, it's absolutely lovely to have you here, Hilary, and welcome to you. You're going to introduce our panel of speakers. Thank you.
Hello, I'm so glad they skipped the full bio. It was just embarrassing. It's lovely to be here. And one thing that's always struck me about Renew is that they do like to bypass the palaver and go straight to, can we fix it? Yes, we can. So let's welcome our panellists to tell us where we're at and where we could be, where we could go with the technology and the know-how and the opportunities that are around today. Erika Bartak, and I'll get you to come up to the stage when I mention your name. She's an ESD consultant and sustainable housing researcher with a background in architecture. As a PhD researcher with the Thrive Research Hub at the University of Melbourne, she's keen to advance sustainability outcomes in the mass housing market. Small job. James Legge is one of the founding directors of 6 Degrees Architects. He's a fellow of the Australian Institute of Architects and a foundational member of the Nightingale Housing Board, and he's currently leading the second Nightingale Model project in Fairfield. And when I mentioned this to some friends earlier, their eyes just lit up. Mark Moyse was going to be here tonight from Sky Farm and Biofilter, but unfortunately he's unwell. So Damien Moyse has wonderfully stepped in. He's the Policy and Projects Manager at Renew. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to come and join you. We're going to try a little experiment that is almost ABC in its level of not using technology. We're going to share that, and I'm just going to be in charge of this one, okay? But that's all right. Let's start with you, Erika. As a practitioner and an academic, what are you seeing done right, and what could we do better?
Thank you. It's probably easiest for me to talk about my work that I'm doing as a researcher looking at Australia's big volume builders. Closer to the microphone, and coincidentally doing a bit in practice as well in that field. So I think there's Stephen Lynch from SV here. SV is doing a great project with piloting energy efficient and zero net carbon homes for volume builders. It's easy to talk about what's wrong. Is that a terrible sound?
Yes, someone's fixing it now.
It's easy to talk about what's wrong with our mass housing. Think of the outer suburbs and the sprawl that we have there, and the houses on tiny lots, or looking at their fences or their neighbours. But there's some really good steps being made, especially in SV's pilot, and some other individual builders that are taking those steps, looking at trying to build more quality homes. I think 6-star energy ratings, you guys would be familiar with that. It's not a bad standard by itself, but if we actually built that way, which actually doesn't happen very much, that would be a really great step. So looking at how to actually verify that we're building what is on paper.
Can I just quickly ask about that gap between 6 stars in the design and in the build? How does that happen?
Because all that's required at the moment is for designs to be certified on paper before they're built. It's up to the building surveyor to check, but they don't really have that much time and space to do that in between checking the structure and everything else. And that's something that could be really done and might be coming into future building codes, is how to actually verify that what was on paper is actually getting built, finding the gaps in insulation, sealing up the gaps and cracks. Because a lot of the homes currently, especially in that mass housing market where it's really about the cheapest price for the biggest shiny space you can get, is kind of skewed to, you know, cutting corners and maybe not doing all that work and not having all that training and education for the builders.
Which does make me wonder if you are keen to get from the shiny new space for a low price model to the whole of life, high performance, long environmental benefits model. Are we talking about the overthrow of capitalism here, or is there something that we can do on the way?
The more I do research, the more I think I just need to change politics or something rather than one builder at a time. But yeah, I think the builders that are moving in the right direction, and the research and things like the initiatives from Renew, looking at just changing that language for homes rather than just that upfront cost and that mortgage price, which I know is important. Talking about ongoing affordability and how do you save money for people on their bills over time is actually a really big deal for a lot of people, but it's not often thought about at that upfront buying stage. How to make these homes more comfortable, more healthy, having like less potentially medical costs and things like that, and we're talking about more extreme weather events. How do your homes cope in that situation? So I think the better homes are pointing in that direction, and there's obviously a lot of environmental benefits from that as well.
And speaking of better homes, James, if we could go to the Nightingale model, what are you doing differently and why is it getting such traction?
Nightingale was a concept, I guess, came about from a bunch of architects not liking what they were being made to do by developers. And anyway, not all developers are bad, but there are plenty of developers who try to wring as many dollars as possible out of a project. And quite often what goes by the wayside is good environmental outcomes, but also good amenity. And I once heard a developer talk about being surprised that clients were coming to him now and asking him to build homes that people could live in, apartments that people could live in. And I put my hand up and said, what were the other ones for? and he didn't bat an eyelid, he just said straight back, they were for investors. And so there's an issue there, a big issue there. People obviously have to live in these homes and the investors to make money. But things are gradually changing. I guess what Nightingale is trying to do is, it's difficult to explain in a sentence, but we are a bunch of architects who are essentially looking at, we're still using the existing development paradigm because we need to in order to raise money for loans from banks to build these things, but what we have committed to essentially is a transparent process where we cap the return to the investors that we need to have for equity. They know they're getting, what we're aiming to give them is a capped return. Anything more than that goes back into the project or goes into decreasing the price of the apartments. We only sell these homes to owner-occupiers, and we have various conditions, essentially, that Nightingale architects have to meet, such as have these 7.5 rated homes. We make a whole lot of savings by doing things like not having air conditioning in them because they're well-insulated homes that tend not to need it. Not having cars if they don't require it at the next to a railway station, so these are all savings. Only having a single bathroom rather than having double bathrooms. These are 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, but real estate agents always say that you have to have 1 bathroom per bedroom, it seems. Having shared laundries, which also helps the community, so shared laundry on the roof space. And then not having fees like real estate agent fees. So we've got 8,500 people wanting to buy our homes in our database. So we don't need real estate agents, and there are fees that go into that. So all the money that we save through these sorts of processes accounts for a lot of money, and that essentially then comes off the price of the apartment or improves the quality of the apartment. And invariably it's a little bit of both. So we're doing Nightingale 2 in Fairfield, and it's got a community room. All the apartments have cross-flow ventilation. They're all, we've got an 8.7 star average for them. Some of them are over 9 stars, 50% of them are 8.9 stars. And they've got a fantastic timber window, which good, great cross ventilation, well insulated, and then a shared roof space on top with shared garden, etc. 15 kilowatts of power from solar, which goes into an embedded network. There's no gas used on the site, so we buy green energy because we have an embedded network. We can buy it at less than the rate that most users would be buying their black power for. So during occupation, during use, the building is completely fossil free. So it's things like that, basically, and there's no reason not for apartments not to be doing these sorts of things. I guess that's
I can see, if you gave that list to a developer, they would be sucking air through their teeth going, it's going to cost too much per unit, How do you compare on cost?
We're cheaper than them. So we aim to be 20% below, we're not, we're 10%, it depends on the site. Often you go in there thinking, this is going to be great, we pay this much, we'll get this, but then, we're in Nightingale in particular, we're right next to a railway line. It was a complete nightmare to build because we're next to a railway line. The upside of it was we've got 4 sides which are open and not encumbered by any other properties, and the whole thing's facing north, which is part of the reason why we've got an 8.7 star average, because we've got great natural light and ventilation. But there are always things on the site you don't quite expect. But because we're open and transparent about it, it still comes in less than market.
Well, I think a lot of people were stunned by the level of interest in the commons of Nightingale and these new models. How important do you think those community engagement parts of the model were? I mean, the environmental stuff people were very excited about, but do you think it's just as important to have those spaces where people can gather and the outreach to the local community as well?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think there are a lot of people out in Melbourne who are actually looking for community and looking to be part of a community. And I think that's going to fall away over the last couple of decades, or the last few decades. And there's a renewed interest in that, I think. People have been putting up fences, tall fences for many decades, and now they're starting to come down again, I think. And I think that's a very important thing. So I think people are looking to engage the community. I think there's also a degree of learning that Melbourne is getting better at designing and building apartments. They've been learning for the last 20 years, so we've got some rubbish out there, which unfortunately will be with us for a long time. And things like legislation's only just catching up with some of those things. And a good example, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, is the idea of borrowed light and ventilation from a bedroom across a living room to a door. So there are plenty of apartments in Melbourne built over the last 10, 20 years that have bedrooms without windows. They have a glass door that goes in the living room, and that's how you get your natural light from the room next door that has an open window, which is a terrible outcome. Now that's come about actually from for quite a good reason. During the 90s, they were renovating a lot of the big old warehouses, and people were buying warehouses that had been broken up, and they wanted to put homes into these warehouses, inner city warehouses and things. And so the code was developed in such a way that to enable people to, they had these fantastic big soaring spaces like here. They wanted to put a bedroom in, so they put a mezzanine in. They didn't want to take up all the window on these beautiful double-storey windows, so they put them back inside. They'd be up on the back wall. And the legislation at the time said you need to have light and ventilation, but they renewed the legislation so you could borrow light and ventilation off this magnificently huge space with shafts of light coming in from double-storey windows. That was the legislation that was still there when someone decided they were going to put an apartment with a 2.4 metre ceiling, and they were going to borrow light from that room into the bedroom next door. So
and I think that
not catching up.
That taps into some of the work you've been doing, Erika, on the regulatory frameworks with urban infill projects. What are you finding there? How is the regulatory framework keeping up there?
That's all right. The flip side to the sort of suburban rural mass housing is the consulting work I do with architects on little inner city projects, say renovating an old little terrace house in a heritage street, doing these great little designs that have a courtyard that bring in all this sunlight and daylight and ventilation, but with the tools that we use, the energy rating says there's a lot of window for a very little floor area, and they have quite a battle with the energy ratings. And while on some big projects I'd be like, you've got too many windows. With these houses, they're so small and the windows are doing such a good job of so many things, connection to outdoors and everything. We could make them smaller and the energy rating would be better, but I don't think that would be a better outcome for a house for people to live in. No one would want to live in that. Like an esky with a couple of little windows in it is an energy efficient building, but it's not necessarily something that people get a lot of joy from, experience the outdoors from indoors, that kind of thing. So that's the other end of my work, is sort of, instead of saying these big dumb houses need to be better at energy ratings, these little smart houses actually need to be better championed, I think. Is like, I find myself banging my head against really blunt tools, and I don't want to knock the regulations because I think they've done a lot to bring up the worst case houses, but for those little inner city projects there needs to be a bit more flexibility about acknowledging they're contorting and doing so many things around overlooking, overshadowing heritage sight lines and everything, and then they put this courtyard in or a skylight that does this great job. And they're tiny, they're 100 square metres and less resources, less energy. I think those outcomes need to be encouraged in some way, not prevented by the regulations.
Damien, if I can come to you for a minute. You've been working for many years at the coalface, fielding calls from people who are very much in a DIY space. Let's get this thing sorted and worry about the regulatory framework later. What kinds of things are you seeing the interest emerging in recent years from your membership?
I think we kind of work in a bit of an unrealistic space sometimes because we are working with members and we're working with people through our energy consult service or projects we're doing, and they're doing all these things, whether it's the basic energy efficiency type stuff or they've just done solar, they're looking at batteries, EVs, all the kind of newer, bigger, shinier things that are going on. So, sometimes you kind of think, everyone's doing this, where it's actually only 5-10% of the population. I guess, the theme for us and a lot of the members, I guess, and our research projects at work has been the general kind of electrification of everything, I guess, in terms of renewable energy, but not just that. We need energy efficiency in order to move to renewables. We need to electrify transport. We kind of need to think about it as that kind of holistic framework, and doing so like at kind of household level actually works really well. There's a lot of things that people can control, small things they can do now, and people are obviously building new or doing renovations, there's a whole heap they can do, but also a big part of our work with people is just trying to get them to think about the next thing, the plan. You're going to be in this house for, the next 12 months or 5 years, 10 years. Then, think about your major appliances and, if you kind of think about an EV, think about, doing some planning around that with wiring and switchboards and just having a bit of an energy management plan because, in the not too distant future, you can get to basically zero bills. I mean, zero carbon is actually easy. You can have a one-star house with lots of solar with zero carbon. Now, that's not ideally the thing that we necessarily want, but with a bit of planning and sort of foresight, you then can set up homes to perform that way.
So you're seeing the energy and the optimism and the excitement and the solutions focus from your members. How's the skills and commitment level in the people they need to help them get there, the suppliers, the general level of technology and policy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, that's, it's a big reason why Renew exists. It's the reason why our consults and those kind of projects exist. So no matter what you want to do, everybody's an expert in their individual thing that they're trying to sell you. So you're talking to the solar guy, or you're talking to the insulation person or whoever. Most people will come to us, the magazines or the consult service, and really they've heard about batteries and they've heard about EVs and all this kind of stuff, and they're really just actually asking, what do I do first? And we just kind of try and take it back and go, okay, well, how much energy do you actually use per year? What are you spending? How old are some of your major appliances? And actually kind of put it into a bit of a decision-making framework rather than just going, it's a battery, so just go and talk to battery suppliers and find the best one possible.
And Erika, what about in your field? Are you seeing rising skill levels in the field generally? Or is it about, do we need to mandate a particular level of skill and commitment among the people who are building these houses?
Yeah, I think I used to think that if we just taught people how to do it better, they would do it better. And since I've spent more time in research, especially talking to volume builders, really understanding better, but maybe others understood this much earlier than I did, they're really pinched on time and money, and it's very much a model of let's just keep doing what we've been doing, and it's that they're not all as bad as we make them out to be, perhaps. There's very good reasons why they keep doing what they've been doing, and it's very efficient for them as a business. And I think not only regulation, but also maybe some really big government and other support for them to upskill and find the time and money to make some of those changes, because it's easy to sort of shout at them they should do something better. But I think it takes a lot of energy and time and money to be able to actually fully implement it. Some of the builders I've spoken to in my research are interested in doing that, and they've been more interested in it than I expected, I'll put it that way. But they just speak about the reality of their day-to-day work and how to incorporate that, and especially when they're in a competitive industry where if others don't and cut corners, they don't necessarily get the benefit of investing. So it's a really hard thing to try and help them along.
I'm just going to say a good example of what has happened, because things do change, they change slowly. When I started my career, the idea of double glazing was just, no one does that. They do that in Europe, and that's now everyone does that. So things do change.
That's a lot of volume builds.
They have to, don't they? Okay.
If someone flukes a really good orientation block, and I've found this in my work, they can get a 6-star energy rating because their living room happens to face north. They've got some decent insulation, and some of the windows are single glazed. It is amazing. I nearly fell off.
It's a learning process for everyone. I'm not sure who can best answer this, but what would be some things that would lower the cost of achieving a good energy efficient design more widely?
I'll have a crack at it. Government policy, I guess the example going back to double glazing is that it is much, much cheaper to do double glazing than it used to be, because everyone has to do it, well, just about everyone has to do it, to a degree everyone has to do it, and which means that the manufacturing base has changed, just set up for it, it happens now. So legislation definitely helps. Education obviously helps, but only to a point. And raising people's aspirations help, and educating the purchasers to want and desire these sorts of things as well.
What about subsidies like we saw for solar? Is that helpful at all?
Subsidies can, I think, help at specific times for specific things, and try and get momentum and stuff. But I would totally agree. Just in the new home kind of building space, it's regulation. Like, we know that just getting that extra start does not cost much anymore, whether that involves double glazing or other things. If there's regulation there, all the developers have to do it, then that just pretty much lowers the cost. We know from the change from 5 to 6 star some 10 years ago that in the end really there's no noticeable kind of cost addition despite kind of what the industry says. And yeah, just, I mean, I know education only goes so far, but if we can kind of educate people to at least ask the right questions of their builders and designers and not be too put off when they say, oh no, it's just too expensive to do that. Well, hang on a sec. You know, there's plenty of examples out here where it doesn't cost, you know, tens of thousands of dollars just to actually get into a more efficient home.
And you might save bills over the years.
Yeah, you know, no one pays cash for a house, so you can balance up the economics.
Legislation also levels the playing field, I think, for the builders. They're not, even if they want to do a better job, now they know that their competition has to as well, so I think that helps. I mean, and easy, just playing off what you mentioned earlier, this idea that homes don't get tested currently is a big one. So even if they were to say, what we're going to start doing is testing 1 in 20 houses post-construction, not going to cost a whole lot, and do a pressure test on them to see what their air changes are. That would dramatically change the way in which people build houses, because some of them will come a cropper and they have to go back and do a lot of work to sell up their houses.
We talked about education just briefly before. I'm wondering how much it is also about educating councils, because everyone freaked out about the idea of not having car parking spaces per person. Is it about saying that there are other things possible and they work?
Yeah, look, again, this has changed over the last little while. So 10 years ago, we would have stand-up arguments with traffic engineers in the inner city suburbs around parking. And they were absolute about meeting the commitments of whatever legislation was in place. But if you look at some of the inner city suburbs such as Moreland and Darebin, they've now got massive problems with too much traffic just clogging up their street. They've completely turned the other way and gone, well, actually, there's a good argument here not to necessarily meet the planning code and all these sorts of things. And so it has become easier. It's not necessarily easier to convince every constituent. And so there'll be plenty of people who will support it and others who won't. And I mean, even with Nightingale too, we had some fairly vocal opposition to the idea of no parking. And we're just about on top of a railway station. We're literally next door to a railway station. So you walk out the door and it's about 10 metres out the front door to get to the railway station. And bicycle paths and buses and all sorts of things. So our argument was, if there's a place where you don't need it, then this is a place where you don't need it. And our purchasers are quite happy. They know they're going in there with their open eyes, not wanting to have a car. We've got a car share space out the front, and I guess the transport environment is changing as we speak almost. The landscape is changing. So I think people are waking up to the idea that you don't necessarily have to have it, and effectively it takes about $50,000 off the price of an apartment. So why should someone who doesn't want to live with a car have to have a car park? If they're struggling already to afford an apartment, why should they have to have one? So it is changing, but you'll still get people who think you're crazy and that basically this is some kind of hippie commune and you're drinking your own urine.
And who's to say what goes on in the privacy of those apartments? We don't judge. Erika, if you could tweak any policy settings at any level of government, what would you do?
Oh, I was just going to add on James's comment though. Also, I think maybe we need to educate real estate agents and all the people who work in sales, because they are so powerful and they don't all necessarily not want to support sustainable designs and things, but they also don't necessarily have the training and the understanding in why that's beneficial or why people would want some of those things. So that'd be interesting. Policy-wise, I don't know, God, there's so many places you could start. I mean, council's really powerful. Well, I feel like they're really powerful in terms of, from the volume builder perspective, even on things like subdivisions and lot sizes. And at the moment, potentially plenty of existing mass housing plans would work okay on a bigger block and you could spin them around, but currently they can't do that, and things happen where the developer comes in, puts in all their services, figures out where the driveways are going to go, and then someone buys the block later, and even if they'd found one that they could flip around and make work better, what's already been built in has locked them out of doing that orientation and some of the basics of design well. So I mean, I might be naive in thinking council has the ultimate decision. Maybe the developers are very powerful, but that's something big where they could, maybe let people buy the land before the driveway is paved and put into site. Yeah.
Little things.
Yeah, little things. It's just about timing, I think, though. Maybe some of those same with the builders actually constructing and getting tested on whether they put the insulation in right and things like that. The Sustainability Victoria pilot program is really interesting in terms of working with builders and not telling them what to do, just understanding their timing and their sequencing, and then saying, right, well, here's where all the common problems are. Let's work out a program for you guys and your trades to come in and get things there at the right time and give, you know, the guy who puts the building wrap on, give him some extra insulation to stuff in the holes because later you won't be able to get to that. Like, sometimes it's just getting things in the right order so you don't miss an opportunity to do something when it's best to be done.
Is it like an extra level of project managing?
Potentially, but I think if you can, say in the example of volume builders, if you can talk to them about that process, if someone is available to talk to them about that process, the ones we've been talking to are willing to do it. They just hadn't realised that was A, a problem, and B, it wouldn't be that hard to flip things around and give someone a few more bits of material, and then they can solve that problem pretty easily.
One of the things that's I think people liked about Nightingale was that it gave a sense of equity, and I think I want to ask all of you, how can we ensure that the benefits of environmentally sustainable design and alternative living models are more widely available to everyone who needs them, not just, you know, people who can afford to buy this great tech? Leap in.
What can be done to ensure that can happen?
Yeah, I mean, is the Nightingale model something you can roll out more widely on a social housing model, or is it something that helps increase affordability in a market that has not been doing really well on it?
I think a bit of both. I mean, one of the things we talked about when we started setting it up was the idea that Nightingale might not have to exist in a few years if it sets an example that other people start to emulate and other developers start to do it, so we can do that too.
How many developers have taken it up so far?
Yeah, none. That's probably not fair. There are certainly, like anything, there's a spectrum of developers, and there are people at one end of the spectrum that are just trying to wring every last dollar out, and people at the other end who are trying to do the right thing. So, I mean, look, I think we can set an example and we can show that it can be done, and I think that helps a lot. There are all sorts of different ways of making houses and apartments more affordable and better. There are cultural changes, there are government changes, and if you look at Europe, and one of the things we're trying to do with Nightingale is to try to make it cheaper. If we can get our finance cheaper by not having to have equity investors, because we get all our money from the bank, then we can immediately take another $50,000 or $100,000 off every apartment. So there are things that can be done, and they do this in Germany. There's a thing called Baugruppen in Germany where the banks enable finance for a group of 20 people who want to build an apartment. They don't have to have a developer in between. So the 30% profit the developer would otherwise get goes into making those apartments cheaper. And the bank, and that's only possible because the banks recognise it. The banks, you know, would laugh in your face if you tried to do that here. And so there's a risk profile that they're prepared to take or not prepared to take. Some of the banks are definitely starting to look at it. I think Bank Australia is a sponsor here, and they're certainly helping us in looking at these sorts of things. So, but they're in a minority.
Well, I like how at Nightingale too, you got sponsorship from various companies who were prepared to support that model and see their appliances in every apartment. Is that something you could go further with?
Potentially, yes. I mean, we're quite happy to if they're prepared to. You know, that they obviously like the idea of being associated with us. If it fits into the model and what we're doing, no problem at all. As long as it does.
Yeah. Can I go to you, Damien? Because I think this is something that Renew is very keen to grapple with. How do you make this technology more equitable so that it's not just, you know, the rich saving on their power bills, but that tech goes where it's needed more generally?
Yep. So I guess if we're talking about homes, then the Nightingale experience. There's a number of green developments around. There's another one on Victoria's Bass Coast called the Cape, which is more greenfields, kind of, you know, suburban type development. These projects are demonstrating in that new home space that it doesn't cost any more to do these things. Actually, it just you know, it's just a smarter, you know, better way of doing them. And so essentially with government regulation, we're not imposing huge costs on new home buyers, and we can do that, and everybody can kind of benefit. In the existing home space, it is different. It is more complex. The kind of technologies, the approaches used for existing homes is a bit more challenging, a bit more long-term, but we need it. As we say, 50% of the homes that will exist in 2050 have been built now, they exist now. So in that kind of space, we need still broad policies like mandatory disclosure of energy performance when you rent or buy a building, and then we need minimum standards in there that ratchet up over time. We need governments doing their bit in terms of government-owned social housing and those kind of spaces too.
I do want to go to questions. Erika, do you have any thoughts that you want to add on this topic before we do it?
Just to carry on with what these gentlemen have said, is just in terms of lending and in terms of especially that sort of first home buyer, cheapest end of the market, volume housing, if there was someone bundling up, and I don't know who's best placed to drive it, it's great when banks are doing it, but also whether the builders bring it along, reflecting the fact that better built, more energy efficient homes will cost less to run in the long term. How does that get reflected in people's loan approvals and things like that? Acknowledging that the operational costs are lower, even though they might have to invest a little bit more upfront for improving their insulation or their glazing or something. I think there's potential there.
Well, if you've got a question, we're doing the stand up and shout model. So if you've got, I'll just point to you, go.
I'm interested in prefab housing and if that's a really good applicable thing to infill or new development, that it can be built off-site in a way that controls more and will work.
There's definitely new technology here which is interesting. So CLT technology in particular, which is laminated timber, which is prefab, and because it's plantation timber, it means it actually uses energy or sucks up energy. So it's a carbon sink. Now this is in its infancy here. Lots of people are trying to get it up and off the ground. There have been a few buildings that have gone up. This is obviously larger homes or larger buildings. I think that's got a long way to go, and I think that's a great new technology that will assist in this. So at the moment, most of our big buildings are still made out of concrete, which is incredibly energy intensive. The only thing they've got for them really is longevity, but there's a lot of carbon goes into production of them. In terms of prefab homes in particular, it's still pretty hard to beat the cost of building on greenfield site with stick frame construction. They're incredibly efficient at it. They're small businesses working out the back of a couple of utes, and it's hard to actually beat that in terms of price. And that's part of the problem I think the government has in terms of, we can say more people should live in apartments, but it's not cheaper per square metre.
I've got a question up the back with the red scarf. Jack.
I'm from Nest Home, so we're a social venture and we work with industry to do prefab. In a previous life, I also worked with energy raters. Just a comment first with regards to the perverse outcomes that we're often seeing is that volume builders too are also screwing energy raters down on price. And so if they don't comply with giving them a good rating, there's obviously issues there. So we only need one class action, or we only need one suing it to occur. A lot of that actually goes under the rug, so there are issues that occur there, which is unfortunate. And with regards to the prefab industry, totally agree. In terms of the competitiveness, with us we've got so many people that want to buy our houses regionally, but prefabricators don't actually want to do all the site services. So therefore the banks are, how do we get banks to assist our customers where there's a number of builders that are involved? It's actually two builders that end up being there. It's really quite complex.
There's some, from my understanding as well, I mean, this certainly relates to the CLT issues. My understanding is banks don't want to, as an architect you find you can't approve payments to the builder if it's not on site. And that's obviously a big problem for prefab. So there's work, you have to deal with workarounds, or it's just not possible. And banks don't tend to be very flexible in these sorts of things. So bringing these sorts of things always requires a lot of work to get the banks over the line about how you might do that.
Yep, question here.
Hi, I'm an ex-builder and an estimator as well, and I think we can talk about all the... it's not pie in the sky because it's important, but how do you guys see the education space right at the beginning with the apprentices and building that culture of wanting to do? Because I know a lot of builders who don't like working for volume builders. It's depressing, they hate doing the same thing all the time. They don't like doing a rubbish job. I think when we talk about builders, we have to be careful not to talk about tradespeople as well. So is there, is Renew doing anything in the education space with training organisations and the like to increase the efficiency? And do you think we shouldn't be maybe jumping too far forward, and is it potentially more of a likely way, to implement, use standards to confront construction, but in a smarter way that we can train people in a kind of a slower manner? Sorry, that's quite a long question.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, so we're not a training organisation as such, but as part of the general campaign that we're trying to push for housing generally, Don will talk a bit more about after this. I mean, so there's a number of different areas that we would like governments and regulators to concentrate on. The skills gap, I guess, and training gap is absolutely a critical part of that. We've been talking to lots of people as part of stakeholder engagement we've been doing with industry experts around compliance issues, and just basic skills gaps and training just keeps coming up again and again and again. We do understand there's builders and designers out there that want to go further than the current volume builder framework allows them to go, and there needs to be that opportunity for that. But I think there needs to be a real focus. So just getting standards lifted without the whole compliance regime, skills and education for professionals will be a huge miss.
I think we've got time for one more question, yeah?
It struck me, thank you for your discussion, it struck me on listening to you that all of you are working to turn residents into active citizens in some way who are participating in the space that they live in. And then your question made me wonder, I guess it's quite speculative, but because this is an innovation discussion, I wonder if we think about something like the Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Garden Foundation, getting kids involved, being active citizens in their food systems, in your imagination, what would something like that be in this space, in Australian homes?
Thank you for that question, because I was speaking to some friends about this just before. One of the other 1,000 PhDs I could be doing right now is that I feel like we don't have much as a society, like building education. And I was like, maybe we could be teaching kids in schools, like how to use buildings properly and what to expect of them. And things have come up in my project about, giving homeowners like building user guides, like teaching them. I just assume people know they should pull the shading down when it's hot. Not everyone thinks that's true. Maybe that one's obvious, but other things like opening the windows for ventilation and stuff. And it's like, we just even don't have a common language. Not everyone has that common language about how to live in and occupy their buildings. For a lot of people, it's just come home and turn the aircon on. Not because they don't care, but just that's what they know and that's how they've lived in their houses. And something for kids in schools about how do homes and buildings work would be, I think that'd be amazing.
I want to quickly finish up with you, Damien. Can you tell us what some of the most exciting new things you're hearing about and seeing are? What are the things that you think have the most potential to do good in this space?
I guess, there's more and more interest and more and more conversations that we're having. I think there is a bit of momentum around the housing stuff, and then you've also got kind of the pure energy side of stuff where there's things happening. So for us, it's not about kind of one particular technology, but there is a bit of a groundswell. We kind of think both, the technology, some technologies are there, the economics, the social desire, things like, when we talk about housing stuff, it's about public health, it's about emissions, about all sorts of different things. So it's probably that, there is a real opportunity, and we can kind of have a decent debate with perhaps, opponents in the industry or even in government that, there's an opportunity to do something here which will advance the level of renewable content, efficiency, lower bills, public health, comfort, all the things that we kind of want to bring together.
Well, I look forward to chairing that debate. I'll see you back here in a couple of months. Please give our panellists a big hand. Thanks so much, Damien.
We'll let you step down,
but you might not know, if you've been to a Renew event before, that we actually we don't actually give you out a bottle of wine, which is what you usually actually get at one of these events. But you actually get one of these looky lights that all of us in our office are really addicted to. There's solar LED lanterns. I've got them next to my back door, so when I need to go out to the garden to get things for dinner, I get my looky light. So we'd love to give you Hilary, James and Erika, Damien, you've probably got 5 minutes. We'd like to give you one of our looky lights as appreciation for tonight for the discussion. So thank you.
So it was really interesting listening to that discussion because I think about 10 of the different topics and things got raised, so things that we've been talking about in the office over the last 2 years at Renew. And it's about how can we make it so that the majority of Australians actually live in housing that is not too cold, it's not too hot, and it's not too expensive to run. So some people might not know that more people die in Australia due to heat waves than any other natural disaster, while our rate of cold-associated deaths is double that of Sweden. More than 3,000 Australians are estimated to die each year during periods of hot and cold weather. Almost double the number of Australians that die in road accidents. Just this week, you might have seen in the news, there was a new research that came out from the Alfred and Monash University that showed that an alarming 87% of elderly patients that present into hospital with hypothermia have been spending most of their time indoors. People are dying of hypothermia in their own homes. So how is this possible when we live in a warm and wealthy country like Australia? We need to build better. And we've just been talking about that just then. We need to live in better quality homes that are comfortable and healthy to live in year round and without the need of excessive energy use. Our panellists have already discussed how we have got the solutions already to how we can actually keep our homes more comfortable, warm in winter, cool in summer, with low energy costs and without costing the earth. The trouble though, those most at risk, such as those elderly pensioners, who are fearful of turning on their heater during winter because of the cost, are often the least able to respond because they can't afford the upfront costs, improving the energy efficiency of their home, and or because they owe rent. And while our housing stock still remains inefficient, we are missing significantly low to negative cost opportunities to reduce the emissions across the Australian economy and create thousands of jobs. Recent analysis by the Energy Efficiency Council found that implementing basic improvements to Australian homes and businesses will create an extra 120,000 jobs per year. While energy bill savings freed up for spending elsewhere in the economy will contribute to further economic stimulus and job creation. But we're not going to get that rapid and broad-scale improvement in housing quality we need and make sure that those most in need are not missing out with voluntary action alone. Government action across a range of policy areas affecting both new and existing homes will also be critical. That's why we see advocacy as such an important complementary part of our work, particularly to those who ensure their voices of consumers are heard loud and clear in decision making, affecting the quality of life for decades to come. So some of you might not know that we've been working over the last 6 months building a coalition of groups across the country. Renew is a consumer-focused group organisation with 11,000 members and almost 40 years' experience, are well placed to lead this transition. Since October last year, Renew has been working closely with the Australian Council of Social Services and Energy Consumers Australia to build a national coalition of more than 65 consumer groups who share a commitment to improving the energy performance of all Australian homes, new and existing, to unlock the substantial economic, health, safety, and environmental benefits of efficient homes. We've been able to do this in 6 months, and we'll be able to do it. We have on board Anne Martinelli, our new sustainable housing advocate, who's working 4 days a week in our office just on this issue alone. And Anne apologises for not being here tonight. She had a clash. There's a school concert that took precedence over this tonight. But we need to act now. More than half our buildings that we're going to be living in 2050 has still not been built. Australia is currently going through a population boom with current projections that our population will grow from 25 million to 37 million by 2050. That is building about 200,000 houses a year. Even if the Paris Agreement to limit global temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius met, major Australian cities are likely to experience 50-degree days by 2040, well within the lifetime of homes being built today. Australians will continue to be exposed to significant health and affordability risk if our house is not capable of maintaining a safe indoor temperature without excessive energy use. If we don't act now, these homes will be built below standard, locking us into a 100-year problem. So what does a climate resilient home look like? We've already had 6 samples tonight from our panel tonight. I've been Nightingale 2, I actually got a tour of 2 weeks ago, and it's an amazing job that you've done there, James. And we were going for a building, there's still a bit of a building site, and it was a cold, drizzly day, it was like a bit like today. We're sitting up on the garden on top of the roof, the Nightingale 2, watching the storm come across. We went down into the apartments downstairs, which is still just getting finished, and it was like you could take your jacket off. It was actually substantially warmer already. And also Damien alluded to another project that we've been working closely with, the Cape, that's down at Cape Patterson. Homes that are Cape are where we've done a bit of economic analysis on will cost about $500 per annum to actually live in, and they're kept at a comfortable temperature all the time. And they're being built at about 2,000 K per square metre, so a typical industry building costs. So, as we've been talking about already, we actually do already have the solutions of what these climate resilient homes can look like. So what do we need to change? So the main policy change that we're looking at the moment is the National Construction Code, which is reviewed every 3 years. Each update of the code is the opportunity to ensure regulations are keeping pace with the challenges of the future. The latest code review came in effect last month, and once again there was no increase to the minimum energy efficiency standard for residential buildings. We've been stuck at 6 for quite some time. By the time the next opportunity comes around in 2022, will have been 12 years since the 6-star standard was introduced, during which time electricity prices have doubled. And while our minimum standards remain marooned at 6-star, the majority of new home buyers will continue to miss out on the benefits of high-performing homes, and will be largely unaware that they could and should expect more. Raising the 6-star standard will make efficient homes the new normal, ensuring home buyers, not only the most informed, can enjoy the benefits of healthy, comfortable, low-energy homes. A big part of the problem has been the lack of strong, united consumer voice this process to balance the interests of housing industry and developers. This is where Renew comes in. While 2022 might seem a long way away, work is already beginning on the 2022 update to the code, with major decisions likely to be made by the state and territory building ministers later in the next couple of months. So what do we need to do? Firstly, we need to ensure that the trajectory for low energy homes recommendations that got passed by the Energy Co-Ag ministers in December are implemented into the National Construction Code for 2022. So we need to increase the minimum standard new homes from 6 to at least 7 stars. To do that, we need to run a national campaign combining lobbying of key decision makers with effective public advocacy, raising awareness of the benefits of higher standards and building public support for policy change. We'll be leading that coalition of consumer groups with housing, environment and energy organisations to get that job done. Secondly, we want a commitment to a trajectory towards a goal of net zero energy ready homes with minimum standards for existing homes ratcheted up over time. And I think addressing the question we had from the floor, we need to give industry a trajectory so they can actually change the models and how they actually operate already, and actually they can put in place the training and other programs too. We've already recently convened a strategy workshop to refine plans for our public advocacy, particularly lead up to next summer, to highlight the health and safety risks of poor quality housing. We'll be working closely with health and social sector allies to be making a compelling story. Thirdly, we want a commitment by building ministers to address the compliance gaps, which once again a hot topic we were talking about before, where buildings are constructed not actually performing to the required standard. We just completed research to establish the scope and extent of the problem and identify areas for address that will be taken up to the relevant building and planning ministers in the coming months. We need better systems for auditing and inspection, both in terms of checking buildings are constructed consistent with assessed designs, but also once they're constructed, they actually perform as expected. And as James pointed out, blow draw testing is an excellent way to do that. Making this information more readily accessible and available to potential buyers will also be key to improving accountability. Lastly, we need to educate consumers. We need them to understand the value of more efficient homes and demand it from housing providers. Renew already conducts education for our Renew and Sanctuary magazines, and also our event Sustainable House Day, which last year we had 33,000 people visit homes across the country. But we need to reach more people. So that is okay for new homes. What do we need to do for existing? As Damien mentioned, existing homes are a little bit harder part of the puzzle. Oh, back one. Back two. In terms of existing homes, the situation is a bit more complex. There's a diversity of policy options that need to make a difference. A key policy reform that we know will make a major difference is the significant portion of our housing stock is mandatory efficiency standards of rental homes. So the efficiency in rental homes is currently a live subject in both Queensland, ACT, New South Wales and Victoria. In Victoria, we currently have a great opportunity to get effective efficiency standards in place as part of the rental reforms the Victorian Government passed in September last year. We're leading the charge with our 1 Million Homes Alliance partners, and we're hopeful if we get a good result in Victoria, we'll pave the way for similar reforms in other states. There's also new work being done by the Federal Department of Environment and Energy called Directive for Low Energy Homes, which is what they did last year for new homes, which we actually lobbied at the end of last year. We need a similar process for existing homes, which they did take on board and did get passed. So that's a process that's going on at the moment, and recommendations will be going to the energy ministers in December this year. So this is a process that we're going to be working quite closely with our partners to make sure that we get the best outcomes and make sure that we can actually improve the whole of the existing housing stock as well. Oops. I think I've been working in this sector for the last 15 years looking at sustainable housing, and I have never seen the momentum for change that we've been looking at in the last 2 years. I think due to excellent examples of some of the things that go in Nightingale, the Cape, there's also the programs that Erika mentioned that Sustainable Victoria are doing here in volume builds. There is so much momentum out there that we need to actually change our housing stock. I was at the Energy Efficiency Council's 10th birthday last week, and they usually do most of their work in the commercial building sector. And the top three of their policy asks that they're going to be working on for the next 12 months is to look to improving the minimum standard National Construction Code and actually lobby as well for minimum standards for rental homes as well. The Australian Sustainable Building Environment Council, which is a peak body of industry groups across the country, they just in the same day talked about how they're going to actually actively lobby to make sure there's going to be proper consumer representation for the National Construction Code process. All of this is led from the work that we've been developing over the last 6 months to actually get a consumer voice into this debate that's been missing for such a long time. Some of you might know Rob Murray-Leach from the Energy Efficiency Council. When we were talking to him about the work we've been doing over the last couple of months, he just goes, this is the most exciting thing that's happened in energy efficiency for years. So I feel we've had so many leaders from industry who have been paying the charge. But what we need to do is make sure we have now a strong consumer voice to make sure that's heard from the people who make the decisions as well. So our panel has already shown that we do have the technology, we do have the skills, and we do have the knowledge to create climate resilient homes. But we do need the regulation, incentives, and consumer advocacy and education to get that systematic change we need. The cost of doing nothing is too high for our health, our livelihoods and our planet. So that's it for me, so thank you. So that's our spiel of what we're doing, and I'm just going to get Helen to come and join me back up here again. And a little bit what we're going to talk about now is like what you can do.
Indeed, this bit's not rehearsed. So indeed, Donna has pointed out, I guess, how we've made some important shifts within the organisation, and we're building upon the base of the knowledge that we have, the expertise that we've developed over nearly 40 years, and how we're now taking that into a really strong position to really make a substantial change in Australia. We have a very clear vision about how to do that. We know that we have the best voice in the country to be able to do that, to argue the case against all the opposition that has been there for many, many years, against the costs, the intractability of change, and how difficult change may be. But we've got, I think, sufficient momentum amongst our members and across the Australian community and with those partners to move forward. It's unfortunate that Anne wasn't here tonight because she's been a substantial key plank in the organisation being able to move forward into this space, and her salary is paid for out of the donations that we've received, in part from the fundraising event we had last year, plus also the support that we've gained from the other sponsors and partners too. So the purpose of tonight really is also to say we're asking again, if you believe in this vision and how important it is, and you want us to make substantial inroads to really change how Australia performs without housing, we really want to take this to another level, and hence we're here with you tonight.
As I said, we're actually working at the moment to change the housing sector for all consumers in Australia with someone working 4 days a week. So no small job that we're trying to achieve at the moment. But for us to actually do that and do it well, as we're talking about, with a bit of a communications campaign that we want to do, especially leading up to summer next year, we probably actually need about $200,000 a year just to run that campaign. So we've had quite a bit of support over the last 12 months to actually get us going, but we actually like some further support. But I'll just actually to acknowledge some people who have been with us on this journey for a bit longer. One is Damien Richmond. Where are you, Damien? Damien from Bank Australia, who sounds like half this room wants to talk to.
I was going to put my hand up before.
I'll stand up so people can see you. So
Bank Australia being a long-term partner of us and involved in Sustainable House Day, Speed Day, Sustainability Expert events, and also a lot of the other work that we've done over the time. So we really value the work that you're doing at Bank Australia. And as I said, we really value as well looking at how you're a part of actually the solution as well with financing in this sector as well. So thank you, Damien.
I'll take all the applause.
We did also got a late apology from Ben Liu from Minter Ellison. We're very fortunate that Minter Ellison give us pro bono legal advice on many aspects that we need to be on a governance thing for our organisation. So there's actually no way that we can actually probably afford to get Minter Ellison in any other way. So Ben Liu sends his apologies, and we're just going to give them a quick clap as well.